So thank you very much for the beautiful opening and the beautiful invitation. And I just have to tell you, this is the first time that I've been in a room full of people in a really long time. What a beautiful thing, you know, three-dimensional human beings with feet and everything. It's so cool. And I wanted to kind of ruminate a little bit, just to get started, on food. I love food, I love to cook, I love to eat. I have 6 kids, they love to eat. My mom loved to cook, her mom loved to cook. I have a garden, food. And I work, as Stephanie just said, I work in a lot of different fields. I work in family therapy, I work in ecology, I work with economies, I work with all sorts of different complex systems. And in most of the complex systems that I work, there is an urgent need for change right now. Whether that is in politics, whether it's in social care, whether it's in health, whether it's, like I said, economy, food, education, mental health, pretty much everywhere you look, there's this cry for urgent change. From an evolutionary perspective, there's a really interesting thing about change. And this is a little bit tricky, but here's the thing, is that change requires, in an evolutionary perspective, that something stay the same. So the question is, what's changing and what's staying the same? And being very careful not to mix those up. All right, so one of the things that desperately needs to stay the same is that we need to be able, as mammals, to feed the babies. That's what mammals do. The continuation of mammals, which we are, requires that we can feed the babies. And that the babies can feed the babies. Now, this is not a poster for feeding the babies. This is actually an opening into the fact that just in that question, all 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals is present. You can't feed the babies if you don't deal with the soil. You can't feed the babies if the water isn't clear, if the air isn't clear. Feeding the babies means that the people who are growing the food can feed their babies. It means that we're talking about gender and equality. Feeding the babies is a question of science and technology. It's about history, some of which is very uncomfortable to look at. But the future of being able to produce food is not just about food. Food is not just food. What is food made of? Relationships. Food is made of relationships. Relationships to the seasons, relationships to culture, relationships to the soil, to the generations. And so when we look at our plate and we ask, is this food? I'm reminded of something my sister, Mary Catherine Bateson, used to say. She said, people don't eat nutrition, they eat food. What is food? I live in Sweden, and I'm clearly not Swedish. So I have met some of these moments where culture and identity play out through food. And this is not something to be underestimated. When we think of the enormity of the task, of the changes that we need to think about in the next few days around food, culture and identity are right down in there. If you've ever been in Sweden, you know that they have this knife that pulls across the top of the cheese. You know what I'm talking about? And in the States, where I'm originally from, everybody has one of those knives, but you don't actually use it. It's more, you pull it out if you're having a wine and cheese party because it makes you look cultured or something, but actually you don't use it. So I have these stepkids, Swedish stepkids, and one morning my Swedish stepson hollers from the kitchen. He says, "I can't find the cheese knife." And I'm half asleep, and I holler back to him, "It's probably in the dishwasher. Just use a regular knife." And I hear this bumping and bumping. Then finally, this very plaintive, sad voice from the kitchen. "It's not working." It's not working? You take the cheese, you take the knife, you put the knife through the cheese, you cut the cheese. Like, how can that not work? And I go in the kitchen, and he's pushing the knife across the top of the cheese. Now, it never occurred to me that he would do that. And it never occurred to him not to. Right? So the relationship with food is so deep, and the possibility of not seeing these very important pieces that belong to other people's relationships to food. That possibility is right there. Food is not just food, it's relationships. Christmas is always an issue for us. And there's always, like every year, we think we've exhausted the cultural mishaps that we can have in a Swedish-American household around Christmas. And every year, there's new ones. And the last one was when my husband came in and I was making mashed potatoes because it's Christmas. Gotta have a mashed potatoes. Like he was aghast and he said, "What are you doing to those potatoes?" And I said, "I'm making mashed potatoes." He said, "But it's Christmas." And I said, "There's why we have to have mashed potatoes." And he said, "No, but we have to have boiled potatoes on Christmas." And the thing is that we had to actually have both. Because even though I'm not really a Christmas person, and he's not really a Christmas person, the idea of actually having Christmas dinner with the wrong potatoes was more than either of us could actually bear in terms of our marriage. We thought, well, we'll just have them both. This is with humor that I'm bringing you the cultural mishaps of my own family. But actually, this runs deep. Actually, what we're talking about is the way in which the day is perceived, the dinner is perceived, life itself is perceived through food. I mean, obviously, how else are we going to get to tomorrow without something to eat, right? But there's been a trickery. There's been trickery in producing food that looked like food. It tasted like food. It cooked like food. It smelled like food. But it was produced in ways that completely destroyed those relationships which are the prerequisite of food for the future. So, what can we do to increase the ability of our own perception? Right? So for me, those cultural mishap moments are so valuable because they're a reminder of something I didn't see. I mean, it would never occur to me to not mash potatoes on Christmas. It would never occur to me to not just cut the cheese, right? Because that's how you do it. But in my world, if someone comes along and scrapes the top of the cheese, that was kind of rude, because they took a little bit of the slice I was going to have. And in Sweden, if you cut the cheese this way, it's a little rude, because you took a little bit of the cheese that somebody would have got this way. And these are minor things. But I hope you can feel how they go down into these other questions of how do we build communities that get along? How do we provide ways of making communication not only about food, but about the relationships that make food? When these presumptions, these invisible things are lurking, the ecology of food includes identity, includes culture. One of the things that has, of course, come into play is the tension between intimacy and efficiency. Right? We have some chickens at our house. And when we made friends with our chickens and our chickens made eggs, our relationship with eggs really changed. And if then we run out of eggs and we go to the store and you buy eggs, and there's a carton of eggs that's super cheap, but those chickens had their beaks clipped and they were filled with antibiotics and they're living a miserable life. And having that intimate relationship with chickens that live in our own yard, we're more sensitive. Okay, that's the key word. There is a sensitivity to that intimacy. There is a sensitivity to that intimacy. But it's the efficiency that allowed the thought of how are we going to feed the world to scale? 8 billion people, how are we going to feed the world? But that efficiency is actually destroying the relationships that make the food. So it worked for a while. What does it mean to return to that intimacy? That deep down relationship with food that is below your verbal conscious self. The things your mama fed you when you were sick. The candy you ate with your friends. There's a beautiful line from one of my favorite poets. Her name is Andrea Gibson. She's talking about human beings and the fantastic complexity of being a human being. And she says about the human being, what else can touch a screen door and taste lemonade? What else can touch a screen door and taste lemonade? That's summertime and childhood and things are all mixed up. So where's the lemonade? Is it in the summertime? Is it in the screen door? Is it in the lemons? And if you want to change lemonade, if you want to think about how to bring more lemonade, where is that? Because this is an intimate relationship. It's so deep. How do we feed the babies? Probably one of the biggest questions around that also is how do we allow for the possibility of parents to feed their babies, right? It's not just that we need to deliver nutrition packs to children. It's that actually it's in the relationship between the parents and children and the grandparents and the parents and the children. That the whole relationship to food, seasons, gender, economy, ecology, the future, the past, it's all right there. So I think we open with that. And we're going to be playing with something called warm data in a little while. And I'll give you a deeper introduction, but warm data is that way of looking at information that crosses multiple contexts. contexts. Food is trans-contextual, right? It's economy, it's politics, it's health, it's family, it's history, it's culture, it's education, it's all of those things. But instead of creating a kind of a spike, like a bicycle wheel, for each one of those contexts, the warm data asks, what's the relationship between them? How does the way your family ate come to be how you live in your body and think about health, how you think about the education of your kids, or what is success, or which eggs you buy? How do you justify? So we're going to play with warm data in a little while. We're going to do a warm data lab. But I just wanted to, first of all, just welcome everyone, open the concept of food with as much warmth and depth as I could. So thank you.